And now Work Matters with Julie Mann.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show that ponders the big question, does work matter? And if it does, why? And when we think about the why, we like to think about different things that kind of drive that workplace environment that makes work matter. And I am super excited. I know I'm an HR person, I'm a people person, but I am a person that just loves data, loves numbers. And so on the show, we have Marc Miller joining us. And Marc is the president and founder of Marc S. Miller Associates. He's in New York, and he is an absolute expert on understanding and the importance of workforce analytics, and just really how do businesses, how do we take that workforce analytics and use that to enable our businesses to kind of use that data to identify patterns that impact productivity, impact workforce effectiveness, and how do we use that data to drive action? So, Marc, so psyched you're with me today. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Julie. It's always great to catch up with you and chat about work matters and topics that are important to everybody, not just in human resources, but anybody working in any size organization.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we look at work and we think about just the amount of cloud-based applications that companies use anymore, all of that kind of leads to this large increase in data in workforce analytics. And what I'd like to do, Marc, because I know you've got kind of a slide/model that kind of talks about how we work through opinion to data, to metrics, to analytics, to insights. And I really would like us to try to, for the listeners, kind of work through that model, because I really think it's fascinating when we think about workforce analytics. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's kind of talk about that.
Great, fine. Well, this morning I'd like to just focus in the time that we have on the concept of what is workforce analytics. But in order to get to that point, we all have to understand that it starts with data. But even before data, there's people's opinions. Right. So I came across a model that I'm actually using in my classes at NYU and Manhattan College, where I'm an adjunct in human resources management. So this one particular model begins with the concept of everybody has an opinion. So if we think about people's opinions, let's take an example. You walk around and you say, I feel like a lot of people are feeling ill this month. And, of course, in COVID, that's a very accurate statement. Right. But that's your opinion. So then the question is, well, is there anything that supports your opinion? Well, that next step would be data. And an example of data about that would be, okay, we have actual data that shows that the absence levels in the company are up 12% this month. Say you're talking about your employee population, that everybody's coughing a lot and all that. Let's assume COVID or even pre-COVID. So the data says that absence levels are 12% this month. So that's the data. But then the question is, well, how do we take the data and move it into the next step, which I'm saying is metrics? And you look at it and you say, okay, let's look at the flow of absence levels in the last couple of months. So one item that's a metric would be the level of absenteeism in a company over the period of time. So that metric would say, well, this month absence is 40% higher than average. So that supports the data, which supports your opinion. So then the next question is, well, what's the analytics behind it? Well, it could be that the flu and COVID is significantly higher this month, and the impact of COVID than last month, and that could be an analytic. That is giving you an insight into the metric. And that insight is, well, there should be an actionable insight. So when people use AI, I like to use actionable insight as a contemporary meaning to the two letters AI. Right. So what would be the insight that has been evolved from your original opinion that, whoa, people are walking around coughing and not feeling well? Well, the insight is maybe we should vaccinate our employees against the flu or make sure they all have COVID access to a vaccination when it comes out. So the pathway starts from a person's opinion maybe, or starts with the data that gets into the metric, the analytics, and then the actionable insights. Another way of looking at it, if you could visualize a piece of paper with a bunch of dots on it, and then you color some of those dots in 2 or 3 different colors, and you call that slide information with the colored dots. Right. And then you connect each of the different colors by lines. You might say, well, that depicts knowledge. And then if you branch out those lines going anywhere in any direction, that might be insight. And then when you take a look at the insight and you focus on that, you get wisdom. And then after wisdom, you get impact. It's similar in terms of the concept of what is analytics. So there's a difference between analytics and metrics, where analytics is the connection of data processes and the relationships between data and then moving it forward into the future as well, providing an impetus for any organization to use the underlying data to create a new policy, practice, program, whatever they need to support the original metrics and the original data underlying it. And that says that you need good data, and that resides in most often an HRMS system, or what I call HRIS, HCMS, Human Capital Management System, anything, a system of record. And we all know in the software industry that I'm involved in and write about and speak about and teach about, there's thousands of applications, and they range from top-tier vendors like Workday and Ceridian and ADP and what used to be called Ultimate, and now it's Ultimate Kronos merging with together to create UKG, SAP, all of that. Those are top-tier integrated HRMS vendors that are very critical, and there's one system of truth that maintains the data. And some of these vendors have created ad hoc reports and models and capturing even employee sentiment. All of this builds on the concept of leading a future-oriented step or activity, an actionable insight from the raw data. For a manager to say, give me a list of every employee that works in the Northeast region or the Michigan region that's making greater than X dollars, who's been working with the company for 10 years and speaks 2 foreign languages and are willing to relocate, that's a very nice report, but it's not a strategic report at all. There's got to be some sort of strategic alignment with the company's business and direction. And
that would be an example of data, right? I mean, that's just a reporting out of.
That is a standard static piece of data that some manager might need.
Right.
But if you take a look at, say, turnover of salespeople in a car showroom, and you look at the turnover rate of salespeople in the Michigan region, and that rate over the last 5 to 10 years has been whatever number it is, maybe it's 10%.
Right.
And then the people involved in HR would say, well, if we do nothing, we're going to lose 10% of our salespeople. And we know now, because we're aligned with the C-level executives, and we have a C-level executive ourselves, the CHRO, such as yourself, for example, and we know that the strategy is that there's going to be a new model car hitting the showrooms in 2022, and it takes about 6 months to a year to train all of our salespeople on the new feature functions of a new model. So if we don't do anything, we're not going to have enough salespeople in 2022 based on the data which we projected forward using a simple algorithm or a regression analysis, saying that our 200 salespeople will be down to 120, and we need 200 or more. So we've got to start hiring today and start getting people up to speed and educated and look for the right competencies today, or else we'll be in trouble in 2022. So senior management would say, yeah, you're right, HR people. This is an actionable insight, and we've got to act today in order to be in position for 2022's new model. And that only happens when the HR function is a member of the top level of an organization, knows the organization's mission, vision, and strategies, and utilizes the underlying data like turnover statistics, date of hire, date termination, all the reasons, skills, and competencies, and moves forward and generates actionable insights and forces the company, hopefully not forces them, but moves the company in a direction that they have to do something right away. And it's an actionable activity.
Well, and I think that's the interesting piece of that model is, you know, I get the opinion piece, and I think everybody gets the data piece, right? But I think that, you know, even from a functional standpoint of view from an HR perspective, that, first of all, not historically a heavily data-driven function. And they've made, you know, now we are. I think it's a lot more data-driven than it's ever been. It's going to continue that way.
That's right.
But I think the miss, is, again, creating that metric, creating that analytic, and most importantly, that AI. So if I'm going to have that actionable item, I can't just continue to provide data
Right.
without the actionable insight.
Exactly right.
Because otherwise you're never going to create change, right? I'm just spitting out data. I'm spitting out data. Let's use turnover, right?
Right.
Well, my turnover rate's not changing. You're right, because you're reporting on the data without creating the change, the actionable item that needs to happen to go back to change the opinion, change the data, right? It kind of goes back through that model.
And underlying all of what you just said and all of what I just said is one key word that I try to emphasize in my talks and writings and speeches, et cetera, is the word value.
Right.
HR has to show the value and thus the return on investment, the ROI, of any program that they initiate. Now, there's tons of stuff being written due to COVID in terms of the new power of HR, and I absolutely agree with it. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of data items that have to be maintained in any HR system of truth, whether it's an HRMS or any subset of that, as a data warehouse, to track where people are, how they're working, how they're feeling, what their relatives are, how healthy they are, what are their job responsibilities, can the job be handled remotely, is there such things as job sharing, and all of these things, not just the data to comply with the federal rules with the CARES Act and things like that, but HR is certainly in a position of way more clout, way more influence, because they own the data that's necessary to capture the well-being or to help implement programs that worry about the well-being of the workforce, which is top of mind. It never used to be top of mind, but since COVID, it is top of mind for the employees themselves, and for the organizations are worried about the safety of their workforce and are trying to do everything to make them feel safe.
Right, and engaged, right?
And of course, that all leads to engagement. If employees don't have the trust of senior management, just like we in the world don't have or would want the trust of our leadership and feel both ways, the company will not succeed in this environment at all. You've got to have the trust to keep the people there, and you have to have the trust to keep the people engaged, and you have to make them feel that it's the old Maslow thing, but the Maslow hierarchy. We're down to the foundation of health and safety. Right.
Yeah,
and HR has to have that go beyond that. Say, okay, we got our employees safe. Now let's get them more productive working from home. And that's the challenge.
Right. Well, and I think the key is that you talk about building that trust, and when you think about building that trust, so much of that falls into the communication space, right? I mean, with the data, with the insights, I think, regardless of almost whatever that data point is, one of those actionable insights, based upon where we're at in a societal standpoint of view, is the power to communicate, because the communicate's going to create that trust.
Absolutely. There's got to be communication, good news and bad news, every step of the way, because people are just needing guidance and direction. And of course, there's a lot been written about empathetic leadership, empathetic management. That all falls with diversity, inclusion, and all of that stuff that's social programs. Everything has to be done at the level where HR can manipulate the underlying data and suggest programs and activities to keep the workforce at least copacetic, not necessarily happy, but certainly getting their mind off of their worries about safety and getting them more excited to be engaged in the company and do the best they can working from home. And it's never going to be the same as it was before COVID, and we've got to all adapt, and the companies have to use HR as the messenger for the most cases.
Well, and I really liked, Mark, that when you use that example of the Maslow hierarchy, I hadn't thought about kind of where we're at and how we're moving through this place of change and adaptation with that model in mind. But that's actually, another brilliant thing from Mark Miller. But, that's just like,
Julie.
But that's just, I love that pictorial, because, it really helps us understand how, we are kind of building back up some of those basics, and how important foundational items are. And I think, we used to be further up that hierarchy, and we've slid back down, right?
Right. I don't know about self-actualization, which was always the Maslow pyramid,
right.
The pinnacle. I think people are not even thinking about self-actualization.
No,
They're just saying, how do I get Zoom to work?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult times, and any company that survives through this you got to give them all credit, and that credit has to be equally shared from the senior leadership through HR and the programs that they recognize. And, you can't do a performance appraisal in this time frame. So HR has to say, all right, let's modify the way we do our performance appraisal. So let's make sure we understand what are the constraints of people are having today. And we can't judge them the way it was before COVID.
Right. No, I completely agree. Marc, this has been absolutely fantastic, as I knew it would be. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show. I mean, I think that workforce analytics, that data, I love the model, opinion, data, metrics, analytics, and insight. Absolutely perfect. So for everybody,
pleasure, Julie, as always.
Thank you so much. And for everybody who's listening, have a great day. Let's have an impact on tomorrow. And most importantly, let's make work matter.